You know, we have a big sign above our front window here that says, "A better life starts here." And I'm sure people wonder, what the heck are they talking about? And maybe you even wonder, what the heck are you talking about? And the whole premise is, and that's in spirituality, in New Thought in general, it's in unity for sure, and that is that when you become aware of how you are creating your life, then you can choose to move in a direction that's more peaceful, more grateful, more joyful. And how do you do that? Sometimes a little inch at a time. You know, sometimes it's a breath at a time. Sometimes it's a year at a time. It really depends on how ingrained certain things are. And so today I'd like to look at the idea of likes and dislikes and how they might affect us. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have likes and dislikes. What I'm saying is that if it affects how you're being, then how you're being, as we know, attracts to you more of how you're being. And so this is digging maybe a little deeper than what you've done in the past and looking beyond just the likes and dislikes, but kind of gold mining or diamond mining to see what you can find there. Because I think that all of us would rather be more peaceful than not be so easily disrupted by what's going on around us. Because once we are, at least I know that for me, then I don't respond in the best way for myself. First it resides in my body, how I respond, which then can affect my health. And then it responds by how my interactions are with others. And that affects how I'm going to be. And so you can see how it becomes this perpetual kind of wheel that we're on. So I'd like to share something that's really interesting. You know that I've always said life shows up exactly like what I'm going to talk about on Sunday, right? And I want you to also know that, like, I'm planning all of my talks for next year right now. So they're planned way in advance. So last week's talk was on death and dying, which I planned 12 months prior. And I had this impulse while I was planning the talk to, I'm scrolling through Facebook, to repost something that showed up, and it was little snippets of my life with my family. So my sister and my son when he was young, my grandparents, all of that. And I looked at all of those and thought, you know, how lovely, and I shared it on Facebook, and all kinds of people said, oh, isn't that nice? And then I talked about death and dying. And then on Tuesday, I spontaneously started to cry, on and off all day. And Wednesday, I spontaneously started to cry on and off all day. My husband's looking at me, and he already knows now that, you know, I'm dealing with something or something is floating through. And Thursday, the same thing. And Friday again. And then I get a messenger message on Saturday saying, condolences, I'm so sorry for your loss. And said, I heard that your sister died. And that she died on Thursday. And now we have been estranged, and basically for both of our reasons. You know, we just have not been connected speakingly, but obviously connected spiritually. And so not only was I reminiscing about life a week before, but a year before I already knew something was going to be happening now. So that tells me that there's no such thing as time in spirit, that everything just kind of is in this melting pot. And so sometimes when you're experiencing feelings in your body, maybe they're more than just your little world. Maybe they are just so much more that are Spirit's way of kind of paving the way for you to have more understanding, because it certainly did for me. Now, am I sad that she died? Actually, I'm not, because she was in so much physical pain and distress for the last 15 years that this was really, truly a blessing. And that physical distress and pain caused her to not be a fun person to be around with me anyways. And so we agreed to just not interact because of that. And she was the first to admit that, my blood sugar is really out. I'm a bitch today. That kind of thing, and all of the other things that happened. And so it was fascinating as I thought about her consciously, because I was obviously thinking about her unconsciously. So I invite you as you move forward to recognize that we talk about this idea that we're one. And we're even more connected to the people that we love and that are in our family and that are in our sphere of influence. And to recognize that the things that you're always feeling, is it Katie, or who is it that's the New Thought person who says that you ask, is this mine or is it coming from someone else? I don't recall the name of. No, one of those. I don't recall who it is. So to be aware that, yes, you're an individual expression of spirit, but you also are connected to everyone to some degree. And so how you're being affects everyone around you and your life. And that's the only thing we can control, is how I am being. So then you feel it in some way. You may not even recognize that the reason that you're crying is because of something that someone in your family is going through. Or you're really feeling exuberant because someone in your family is really celebrating, but you don't even know that on a conscious level. So that's the soup that we're in, I believe. Now you could say to me, that's all hooey, and that's okay. I feel that that's the truth for me. And so I'd like for you to be, I'll say, open enough to start to wonder when just a feeling comes out of the blue. What is that? Who is that? What more do I need to know? Okay? So let's look at conditional happiness and our agitated mind, which is sometimes, and the weight of attachment to things. So likes and dislikes aren't the problem. Dependency is. Balance and peace is always an inner journey. Now, I'd like to unpack this idea of being dependent on likes or dislikes. Because I don't know about you, but the older I get, the more I'm dependent on the things I like. So let's set the tone for an inner journey towards balance and peace. So I'm going to have you do maybe a 2-minute meditation as we do this. So let's take a moment to be here now. Close your eyes just for a moment. And let the noise of the day settle. And just be here now. So imagine a calm lake at sunrise. Stillness lives within you too, just like that calm lake. But it's often disturbed by wanting and resisting. And yet in seeing that still sunrise lake, that stillness is in you, or else you wouldn't be able to visualize it. Now bring your attention back to the room. So you know that feeling when something you love goes missing? Maybe it's your car keys. Or maybe it's something else. Or something you dislike won't go away. You know that feeling? Yes. Your peace seems to disappear with it, doesn't it? So what if your peace didn't have to depend on those changes? What if you could, more often than not, say, what's really going on here? And instead of reacting by reacting, to kind of sit with it. Because I know when I burst into these spontaneous tears, my husband said, what's going on? I said, I don't know, but I know it's not for me. So to stop, and because I could have gotten disturbed and said, like, gee, my hormones must really be playing havoc or something. And yet it wasn't that. So let's explore how to return to that inner stillness. how to live with balance and peace even when life doesn't go our way. So let's look at conditional happiness. The problem is not in liking or disliking, it's depending on them for peace. So there are a lot of things that I experience in my day that I don't particularly like, but they don't throw me off the rails. Would you say that you're kind of there too? You can say, like, I don't like it, but, I'll deal with it. And there's not even a pit of the stomach reaction to it. It's just, it's okay. Or our happiness can become conditional. And peace becomes dependent on circumstances. And the thing is that I'm asking you that when you don't feel peaceful, are you dependent on a circumstance that caused you to not be peaceful? Because you inside is that still lake at sunrise. It really is. And you can create your own ripples by the response that you have, but you don't have to. So how about this one? Here's conditional happiness. My morning coffee dependency. If I don't get to have my morning coffee, and it has to have cream and the right amount of cream for my morning to be really good. But is that just a choice or not? And do you have an example? Something where you might not be in such great form that day if something doesn't happen a certain way. So you have likes and dislikes. When your peace depends on things being just right, you actually lose freedom. And it's freedom we're looking for, that sense of not being constricted by anything. So you might argue that it's preference. I prefer to have a coffee with cream, just the right amount, at the right temperature, in the right cup, at the right time. I mean, it's like really specific. That's actually dependency. Can you see how that's dependency? Addiction, that's another word for it. So true happiness is enjoying what is, not just what you prefer. So like this morning, the coffee machine didn't start at the right time because there was a time change, and we have a timer on it. But I happened to sleep through that time that it needed to catch up, and I was happy when I got up because the coffee was ready. But anyways, it's interesting, isn't it? I'm using coffee as an example because it doesn't have a lot of energy around it. But we have things, right? So let's look at the agitated mind. Your desires and dislikes stimulate the mind like wind ripples water. You can't see clearly when the surface is disturbed. So anytime that you're in that place of, agitation, it's pretty hard to be focused at the same time. You can't do both at the same time. But when you notice, you can stop it. So cravings and dislikes disturb inner stillness. Anybody have cravings? And not just food. It could be other things too, right? So example, the humming sound during meditation. The disturbance is not the sound, but in the reaction. We have these beautiful muffled curtains at the back because there's street noise here, for those of you that are watching at home, to allow us to not have as much noise from the street. The thing is, though, that I can tune it out. Have you ever been in a situation where you can be in a really noisy place, but you've tuned it out, like you're totally doing your thing? So you know how to do it. You know how to remove yourself from whatever it is that's bothering you. It's just a reminder. So when your mind moves towards that, what it wants, or away from what it dislikes, peace is lost. It's that wanting. There's like this gnawing, I have to have it. That's not peaceful. That's really agitated, isn't it? So awareness helps you to rest in stillness instead of reaction. And I know this seems like this subtle mumbo jumbo, and why should I care? The thing is that I know that you're already evolved enough. You don't need to hear the basics of how this works. You're probably going to say to me, well, I've been doing this for so long, and yet I still fall off the wagon once in a while. And why is it that I do? Well, it's these subtle things that as you become aware of it, then you can really handle whatever is going on. So everyday cravings is one of the things that can get us. Like, I'll be happy when. Can you think of an example? What was that? I didn't hear it. Oh, something about politics. We won't go there. We don't do that here. Cravings are the mind's way of saying, I can't rest until I have this. They seem harmless, but they quietly steal your peace. They really do. So an example, wanting constant approval or praise. If they don't acknowledge me, I feel unseen. And that may not be you, but maybe you know someone who's that way. And it's in that constant need for approval that when you're in their presence, you can feel a little agitated. Can you recognize that? You say, I don't know why this person makes me uncomfortable, but maybe that's what it is. Some people call it energy vampires or energy sucks, that kind of thing. So checking your phone repeatedly for messages or likes. I know that there is a whole group, age group, that is attached to social media, and they are very attached to this idea of, has anybody seen my posts? Has anybody commented on them? Do they like what I put? Don't they like what I put? You know, all of that kind of thing. So they're an entire group that really could use this understanding to help them get through it. And there's a restlessness that grows instead of peace, and that's why many of these younger individuals, and maybe some of us in this age group as well, are looking at their phones going like, am I alone or is anybody there? Are you there? So needing things to be perfect for you before you can relax. The house spotless, the plan flawless, those can have to finish this before I can move on to something else. I now have more unfinished projects than I've ever had because I've let go of that. Because I know it's still waiting there for me. I can pick it up anytime and finish it. Craving sensory comforts. Oh, the crunch of salty potato chips. You know what's really funny about that is I've gotten so picky about them now that there's only certain times of year that even Frito-Lay's makes potato chips where they have flavor and are the right kind of crunchy. Like, this is about the end of the season. Now if you get chips from here on in, and this is just me, okay? You get chips from here on in, they are like cardboard and don't have the same kind of flavor. I don't know why. So I'm safe in terms of calorie consumption from about November until July, I think. And then they're really good again. So, I'm saved, at least part of the time. Or how about that things need to be the right temperature? The coffee doesn't taste good if it's not the right temperature. Or I'm not happy in this room because it's too cold or it's too hot. Or sitting in the right spot. Someone came in this morning and said, I'm going to sit in a different spot today to feel okay. And, just to play with that and say, okay, I recognize that I do that. Don't make yourself wrong. Just recognize that you do that. So feeling you must stay busy or productive to feel worthy. So if someone says to you, so how are you? You want to be able to list like a gazillion things that you've done so they can say, what a good person you are. And yet it has nothing to do with that. We create our own agendas. And it's not about worthiness. Not to someone else anyways. Maybe it is to you though. Maybe you think that day wasn't even worth living because I didn't accomplish anything. And yet maybe that's exactly what you needed to do. I would say because that's what you did, it was exactly what you needed to do. Reverend Pat and I, when she was my mentor years ago, and that was talking about divine appointment, she would use the term divine appointment, and I'd never heard of that before. And I understand it to be that this is the right and perfect time for what's happening, or else it wouldn't be happening. That's the bottom line. And it's not that somebody fated it or God said, okay, you're going to be here today experiencing this. No, because God's not external. God is this energy, creation, source that we live in, and it is constantly evolving and reacting to us and bringing us to where we are being. So everyday cravings create a mindset that keeps reaching outward for completion. Peace remains postponed. So could I be peaceful and enjoy chips? There have been moments, but not between November and April. Just say. So everyday aversions. I can't stand when. Now, one of my biggest ones was, I can't stand when I have to rush or when I'm late. And I'd literally feel it in my body. And it would make me, like want to snip. So what makes you snip? And perhaps you don't have to. So aversions or dislikes, hatreds are the flip side of cravings. Pushing away what you dislike, they create inner resistance and tension. So think about that one. So what do you hate? Is there anything you hate? Because it's disrupting your peace. Even if you don't want to admit it, it's disrupting your peace. Could you look at it differently, perhaps? Maybe reframe it? Emilio says he did. Resistance brings more of the same through the law of reciprocation. And so that's the thing. What you resist persists. You've heard that said. There is a law of reciprocation. How you are being, more of how you're being. You get an opportunity to do that. You get more of what you're being. So annoyance when someone interrupts or speaks loudly. Have you ever been in the environment of someone who just doesn't have the space for you to say anything? Doesn't create the space. Now I worked with women for 44 years in the beauty business before I went into ministry. So I understand the need to have someone hear you, because many of us don't live lives where we have that kind of communication with other individuals. And so to be heard is really, really important. And rather than being annoyed, and in the beauty business, I was being paid for it. Talk to me all you like, because I'm doing something for you as well. I'm listening to you, hearing you, but I'm also creating something beautiful. So how can you turn that one around for you if there is someone in your life who is annoying in that way, that they're interrupting, to say, I wonder what it is that they haven't been heard about. So if I hear it and I acknowledge it and I talk to them about it, then perhaps that part can be healed. And it's not that you've done the healing. They've released it, so it's no longer there to pester them. So discomfort with silence or with slowness. When we were training to do public speaking, one of the talks that we had to give was to stand for 10 minutes and just look at the audience in the eye and not say a word. And it had to constantly be eye contact. It couldn't be looking at a chair or just looking off into the distance. What a wonderful training, but it was very difficult in the beginning. Like now I can do that no problem, and I can sit here silently and just look at you. And you might get uncomfortable, but I won't. Or how about discomfort with someone is being slow? And what's going on there? You want things to move on more quickly. Or maybe it's an event in life and like, come on, let's make it happen. My son has applied for a job. He's in Sweden with his wife who is doing research in leukemia, and he wants to work, and so he applied for this job. And they said they would tell him on Friday, but then they sent an email saying, oh, we still have a few things we need to consider. We'll tell you on Monday. And he sends ARG across as a text. So he wanted things to move on more quickly, because even though in his soul he knows it's his, now all of a sudden he has doubt. And I know, and in my conversation with him said, just relax, because if this isn't turning up for you, there is something so much better. And this one was fantastic. So the next thing, if it's not this, is going to be like, wow. That's what I believe. So avoiding certain people or situations that trigger judgment or irritation. And it's not anything other than the energy around it. If you're going to avoid it, you've already been triggered. Does that make sense? So it's to think about that and say, okay, how can I be more peaceful in this situation? So avoidance can seem the right thing to do, but the avoidance can also create more. Can you see that? So it's a very subtle things, because what you focus on grows. So feeling disturbed by the weather, by noise, or small inconveniences. I had a little doctor's appointment this week, and it was at the hospital because that's where her clinic is. And I was sitting in the waiting area, which happened to be right at the front door with people coming in. They were actually, the sign above my head was telling them where they should go, so everyone felt like they were looking at me, but they weren't. And when they did focus on me, they'd go, oh, what an awful day, isn't it? Because it was raining outside. And I'd look if they had stopped for long enough to respond and say, I run hot these days, so this is really good for me. And they didn't know what to do with that answer. So reacting with anger or frustration when plans change unexpectedly. Like our trip to Newfoundland changed unexpectedly. We could have been super frustrated by it. We said, no, well, where do we want to explore instead? And we did that. Aversions or avoidance keeps you fighting reality, and peace can't exist where resistance lives. So subtle cravings and aversions, even in spiritual practice, these patterns can appear in refined forms. And I'd like you to think about this. Your likes, dislikes, cravings, and aversions don't vanish just because you're on a spiritual path. Just saying. You're still going to be you. So they often just become more subtle, dressed up in spiritual language and ideals. So craving the good spiritual feelings, being more positive every day, that kind of thing. And you might crave comfort and entertainment and success. And is that not being spiritual? You can still be spiritual and be a human being, for heaven's sakes. So when you meditate or pray, you may start to want spiritual highs immediately. It's like, I've been meditating for 15 years. Why is it that I can't find that peace that I want? I mustn't be very spiritual. But that's not the case. There is just so much more going on. It doesn't have to be bliss or peace or clarity every time you meditate. Sometimes it's just closing your eyes and stopping. And that's an okay meditation. So do you ever experience an aversion to unspiritual feelings? Not wanting to do that, but you just can't help yourself. Like making comments about the politics. I really don't want to do that because I'm a spiritual being, but I just can't help myself because it's really, really bothering me, right? And that's okay. That's okay. Because when you can say that's okay, then there's a lot less negative energy around it. Does that make sense? So just do it, but be okay with it. And then let it go. Or how about metaphysical malpractice, like rejecting your humanity, judging yourself when you feel angry or sad or impatient? In the beginning of my ministerial journey, it was like, if I can't be perfect in all these ways and totally controlled and non-judgmental, then I mustn't be fit for the job. And what I came to understand, and I think some of you appreciate that about me, is I'll talk openly about all of that, because that's the truth. Whether I'm a minister or I'm just a human being having an experience, we have these experiences. It doesn't make me any less spiritual or not, because spirituality isn't what I do. It's who I am beyond this humanness. And it's who you are beyond this humanness. So I shouldn't feel this way. I'm supposed to be calm and loving. I'm supposed to be loving to everybody. I'm a minister, for heaven's sake. I'm a double minister. I should be double loving, right? This is an aversion in disguise, pushing away parts of yourself that you've labeled as wrong. So if there are experiences or parts of yourself or ways that you're behaving that you're saying are wrong, be gentle with yourself. You know, it's okay. And then recognize it and say, do I want this to guide my day? Or would I rather have something else guide my day? So spiritual growth isn't about suppressing emotion, but it's also not about vomiting on everybody about it either. It's about seeing everything with awareness and compassion. And if you don't have anyone that you can let it all out with, write it down, flush it down the toilet, tear it up into little bits, burn it, hug a tree and tell a tree. You know, really, there are ways to do it that are healthy, that also keep your relationships healthy. So you can be spiritual and have human moments. I mean, you're having human moments all the time. The key is presence, not perfection. So craving recognition or spiritual identity, sometimes the ego can crave to be seen as wise, compassionate, awakened even. And we know of them. You hear people who talk in a holy voice. Can you think of any that you've listened to and it's like, ooh, ooh. But that doesn't mean that that's what's going on inside. It means that they're attempting to be the best they can be. So feeling proud of being more mindful than others, or subtly judging those who aren't. Sometimes the old need for approval or superiority hides behind spirituality. So true humility is knowing we're all learning and releasing the need to be someone special on the path. And also knowing that you are special. It's the difference between needing to be and recognizing that you're magnificent, you're beautiful, you're wonderful, and you're perfect just the way that you are. So aversion to the ordinary. As you grow spiritually, you might start avoiding the messy parts. Noise, crowds, people who challenge your peace. And I say that sort of like the oak tree. When it's a little oak tree, it's really hard to be stompled on. But when you're a big oak tree, there's nothing that anyone can do other than with a chainsaw. And that's not going to happen in your life. So just be willing at times to be vulnerable and just go. So how can you make peace instead in some of these things that have come up as I've talked about it today? I can only feel calm when I'm alone or meditating. That's an aversion too. It means our peace depends on controlled conditions. Because real peace travels with you. It's that calm lake that you saw in your mind's eye when you took a moment to visualize it. Because you can't see it unless it exists in you. So have you been craving spiritual experiences? I want to feel bliss every time I meditate. I want to know that God is here. I'll leave that. Have you been comparing your progress to others? They're more peaceful than I am. I shouldn't feel angry or sad if I'm spiritual. Getting upset when the mind won't quiet down. Sometimes you need to listen to it. You might be attached to the idea of peace instead of its natural presence. Because when you're trying to get something, that's not very peaceful. So in short, your likes and dislikes won't disappear with spirituality. Sorry. If you didn't know that, sorry. You just become more aware and then make the best choices in the moment. That's really the long and short of it. So the practice is to notice them, smile, and return to awareness again and again and again. So are you ready to have a spiritual path transform from seeking peace as an experience to living as peace? The more that each of us do, the more the world's going to reflect that for you. So we looked at conditional happiness. What if you let that go? The agitated mind. Maybe some of you have an agitated mind at times. I know I do. And the weight of attachment. I can go without a coffee. I might have to talk to myself a little bit, but I can. So the stronger the like, the deeper the distress when it's gone. Yes. The stronger the dislike, the greater the agitation when it appears. Intense attachments cause suffering. The job promotion, is it joy or despair, like my son? Letting go brings balance and calmness. Attachment magnifies both joy and sorrow. Letting go doesn't mean not caring. It means choosing peace. So you don't have to suppress desire or dislike, only the attachment to them. So peace is not found in controlling life circumstances, but in freeing ourselves from the need to control them. Freedom comes when you no longer depend on likes or dislikes. Allow life to be as it is, and meet it with peace. So your call to action? Start bringing your personal preferences to your awareness. When you're encountering something you dislike, notice if you try to eliminate or avoid it. And try to understand it. Because, I mean, sometimes life is just reactionary, right? We're just reacting. We're like a leaf in the wind. So beyond likes and dislikes is our choice. Because that's the path to freedom.